Welcome in, everybody, to the Saints Insider. Today is Wednesday, November the 13th. I'm Zach Ewing with Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, Jeff Duncan, back after a Saints victory for the first time in 7 weeks.
Feels like 2 years.
Yeah, it really does. Feels like
a lot in this season already.
Long time ago that we were talking about a 2-0 team beating the Dallas Cowboys, Rod.
I feel like I'm as old as Jeff Duncan right now.
That's impossible.
Don't go overboard with this.
I remember driving back from Dallas, realizing we were covering the hottest team in the league. They were 2-0.
I was listening to some podcast talking about, are the Saints a Super Bowl contender?
Right.
All that stuff.
That was some podcast, right? Not this podcast?
It was not this podcast.
Oh, thank goodness.
That was a different one.
We were caught up in the moment.
We were
I
a little
remember
bit.
distinctly.
No, I think that was, at the time, it was fair. I mean,
I remember
we didn't know how bad Dallas was. We kind of brushed off the Carolina game,
Right.
but we thought Dallas was. I mean, they had lost at home and all that, and now Dallas hadn't won at home since then. So they weren't as good as we
Saints
thought.
broke them.
when they beat Dallas. I remember being like, "Oh, this isn't a fluke,"
Right.
because it's Dallas.
Right.
They're good.
Right.
Dallas might be worse than the Saints this year.
They might be the
I
worst
think
team
they
in the
are.
NFC.
I think they are.
I think Carolina surged ahead of both teams.
Atlanta had its way with Dallas, too,
Oh yeah.
a couple weeks ago.
Well, Zach's playoff prediction for Atlanta is going to come true this year.
You mean
Or
for Carolina?
for Carolina.
They're on a roll, baby. 3-6. They're ahead of the Saints, right? Or are they 3?
They're 3-7.
Have they had
Tied.
their bye? Okay.
They were
Tied.
1-7 when they played the Saints.
All right.
both
all
tied.
right. Well, there's still time. We're not even Thanksgiving yet. They could still be a playoff contender,
They're only one game behind the Bucks.
maybe.
More video from Xavier Leggett. That's all I got to say.
Yes, that's true. Trying German food, that was amazing. Also amazing is that Saints Insider is sponsored by Bank Plus. Their banking decisions are actually made here in New Orleans by local bankers who know the community and take the time to know you. From small business to big business, home loans to bank anywhere technology, Bank Plus is here for New Orleans. Learn more at bankplus.net. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Let's take a break. And we'll come back. We're going to talk about whether the Saints can keep this up after their victory over the Atlanta Falcons under interim coach Darren Rizzi. We'll also talk the return of Erik McCoy and the return of one Jameis Winston. That's on today's show right after this.
Nice bike.
Thanks. Can I get it back before Saturday?
That might be tough.
Whoa. Is it just you?
For now, let's take a look.
Hi, strawberry mango. Mm-hmm. Here you go. Thank you. I'll take another one.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
All right, welcome back to the Saints Insider. So the Saints beat the Atlanta Falcons 20-17 on Sunday. I think we all agree it was an impressive performance for a while. They did some good things. They did some things a lot better. They also kind of got away with it a little bit. Younghoe Koo missed 3 field goals. You know, they needed all the stops at the end. The offense stagnated in the second half. A few days later, Luke, how are you looking back on this one? Is it a blip? Is it a sign of things to come? I mean,
like maybe a little bit of both, right? I still don't think that this team's magically just gonna like run the table and be one of the teams that nobody wants to face in January. But look, they did some of the things that they like consistently failed to do in that whole losing streak. Like even the fact when Alvin Kamara dropped that pass on third down that would have won the game one way or another. First of all, like initial reaction, I'm writing the game story. I'm like, come on, man. Like I had like 2 different like files going for whether they won or they lost. I started writing in the lost file because it just felt like the same old Saints, right? How many times this year have they just like had chances to put games away and just didn't do it? I mean, basically the whole reason Dennis got fired. They had a chance to do it against Carolina and they didn't do it then. So for them to close the game out, especially to close the game out defensively, is something they've struggled with throughout much of Dennis Allen's tenure. I I think to me was a sign of like this is a team that is playing differently than it did under the previous head coach, because it's not just a this year problem. That was a problem since the start of 2022. You can go back through the years and find several games each season where they failed to protect a big lead. So I think there are things that I'm taking from it that I feel good about in terms of the rest of the season for the Saints. But I still think they've got so many issues on this team, from the roster to the coaching and the guys who are not playing because they're hurt. It's really hard for me to say like, yeah, Darren Rizzi's gonna make a playoff contender out of a 2-7 football team.
You know, Rod, it was exciting from a standpoint of, obviously, like Luke's saying, change was needed in some way or some fashion, and it sparked this change. And Darren Rizzi is talking about clogging the toilet, and he's got this dramatic thing where he almost collapses at the end of the game, and it's like story time with Riz, you know, every time he has a press conference, and we all kind of feel the energy of that. I don't think that that's the type of thing that can last, though. I mean, you can't rely on that to win you games.
No, you can't. And let me apologize to the one reader who emailed me, by the way. She was, or he, I don't know, they didn't even have a name, but they were disappointed by me talking about the clogging the toilet reference. They were like, just thought it was just...
TMI?
Yeah, yeah. But anyway.
For that reader, Rod was considering not putting that out there, and I talked him into it. So you can blame me for that. I think a lot of people probably enjoyed it, though.
I think more than one person probably got a laugh out of it.
It's a sign of his...
It was just one reader that was...
It's a sign of who he is, that he would go out and start a press conference that way. It's a sign of his humanity.
Yeah, unsolicited.
Right, nobody asked me.
Just brought it up.
This is how my day started.
Tell me about your bowel movements today.
I hope that reader does not listen to the Pat McAfee show, because they were going off yesterday about
shocking.
the toilet. I mean, it was like 10 minutes of poop
If
references.
that reader's taking time to email Rod about this, I doubt they're watching the Pat McAfee show.
Getting to your question, I think, I don't know if it's sustainable. I mean, we looked at the history of these interim coaches. I mean, they win one game at some point, and
it's actually crazy that every Saints interim coach midseason has won exactly one game.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to duplicate it, but I do think this schedule is a little bit more. I didn't look at the other schedules of who they played back in the past, but I do think this schedule is favorable enough for it. I'd be shocked if he didn't get another win or two, at least two more wins. I just think the schedule kind of sets up for that. So I do think Luke talked about the Kamara play. I mean, a week ago they would have lost that game. They would have found a way to lose that game, I feel like. And this time they were able to hold on. And that's kind of how I thought this game would play out. I thought this team would just do – I mean, I think the Falcons are definitely better, but I just thought the Saints would just do just enough to win this game, and the defense would come up and make a play, and that's kind of what happened in this game. So.
Jeff, the interim coach bump is real, but like we said, every Saints interim coach that's come in midseason, going back 50 years, has won exactly one game, and for 4 of the 6, it was their very first game, and then they didn't win again. So there is definitely something to this. It does feel a little bit different with Rizzi. Like, that's kind of who he is he's this energetic guy. It wouldn't be crazy to say that the energy level is going to stay elevated from where it was.
Yeah, I think there's, the power of belief and confidence is real. And we saw it last year with the Raiders when Antonio Pierce took over. I think they ended up beating the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City on
last team to
Christmas Day, right? So it happens. It's very common around the league. But I think this team in particular, having lost 7 in a row, and some other factors coming into play here. They're getting some people back. They were at home. It's their arch rivals. Atlanta, I felt like, was kind of ripe for a loss. They'd won a few big games. So there was a lot of factors, I think, that played into it. But Rod's point about the schedule, I think, is the most important factor here, is that, they're not playing the Detroit Lions this week. I wouldn't be picking the Saints to continue this momentum against the Lions. But they're playing a team maybe in more disarray than they are. With maybe more dysfunction. They do have more dysfunction. So, yeah, you can see them definitely going on a little bit of a roll here against the schedule. And then it starts kind of building. So I think there's possibility here, but I think they're just in too deep a hole to scale completely out of it.
Speaking of your picks, is there somebody we can fire to get you off that losing streak?
Did somebody say speaking of picks? No one was speaking of picks.
Yeah, you did. You said you wouldn't be picking them if they were playing the Lions.
Oh, well, that's true. I did. Yeah. Well, let's just be clear here. I picked the team 6-11 preseason. No one brings that up. We always just talk about this weekly thing where I'm like on the interstate and you text and say,
Oh,
hey, man, I
no,
need the pick,
no,
and I
no.
just throw something out off the top of my head.
No.
Total gut play. Sometimes I pull over on the side of the road.
That's adversity that we all face.
I just
the real pick 6 and 11.
I love that the only 2 picks he got right are the only two out of the 3 picks he got right are the only 2 times you picked against the Saints this year.
He's only gotten 1 pick
no,
right.
I only got 1 pick right. I'm 1 and 9.
Yeah, okay. The
first
two
game.
times you didn't pick the Saints to win. You picked them to go 6-11, and then like this season,
Right.
through 10 games, you've picked them to win 8 out of the 10 games.
I know.
And the only 2 that you didn't pick them to win, they won.
They won, yeah.
I love it.
Against 2 teams you wouldn't have thought they would win against.
It's
They were
just brilliant.
underdogs in both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Take your
it's-
betting advice
it's
from
not-
Jeff Duncan.
6 and 11 preseason. Genius.
The Jeff Duncan fade is 9-1 this year.
Yeah, maybe against the spread he's better. I do want to point out one thing before we move on. I think that the energy bump was definitely a big part of this, and I think that's a big part of what Rizzi brings. But I also think he's just a really good football coach, and I think he knows how to push some right buttons, and I think that to me goes farther than like who he is as an energy guy and the different stuff that he brought in. I think he's smart. I think he's interviewed for head coaching jobs before. He's not like, Rod had. You talked to Rick Venturi, and he was a linebackers coach. Was he a head coach before, or just an interim head coach?
He'd been an interim coach at the Colts, like back in '91 or something.
I just think that it's not like they're putting like Mike Hodges into this or Joe Woods. I don't know if Joe Woods ever. Yeah,
I don't think he's been.
I think Rizzi is a guy who has head coach material. I'm not saying he should be the guy for them moving forward, but I think he knows what he's doing in that lead role. So I do think we need to give him some credit for that beyond just the energy that he brought.
Yeah, look, and it's a great point because in some of the changes seem like change for change's sake, like, moving the lockers around. I mean, that's a good thing, but it's more of an aesthetic change. But when you go in and change on your coaching staff, and you basically, let's be clear here, like Todd Grantham got demoted.
Yeah.
They just did it in a nice way. And he's no longer coaching the defensive line. That's Brian Young. And then you see the response by the defensive line, which probably I would say maybe their best game of the year overall. Changes how many snaps certain players, the rotations. That's not an easy decision that Darren Rizzi made in week 1. I mean, Todd Grantham is a senior level coach. He's coached all over the NFL and the SEC, well respected in the game, and he had to go in and basically tell him you're no longer coaching the defensive line. That's a big time head coach like move.
And we talked about it last week. Darren Rizzi had obviously thought about what he was going to do if he ever got this opportunity. I mean, he made, like you said, some were minor aesthetic changes, some were more dramatic. I mean, and he made these changes all within 24 hours. I mean, like, he was clearly ready for this moment. He knew what he wanted to do, and he did it. So now we get to see, and you talk about the schedule. It's interesting. They play the Browns this week. We'll preview that on Friday, but they're favored by, I think, 1.5 to beat the Browns. And then they get the bye week. So there's sort of like this opportunity to kind of build the momentum, toward the second half of the season, the last portion of the season, under Darren Rizzi. And like, I think a major storyline here, and tell me if you disagree, but a major storyline here is that Darren Rizzi, I think, is going to make a run at the full-time job and be at least a candidate for it.
Right. Yeah, I think he'll absolutely be a candidate for it. I think maybe the one thing that's working against him is if there's a desire in the organization to move beyond the Peyton tree and just like pull that Band-Aid off. But like we'll see how the rest of the season goes. But I would think he would at least have the opportunity to interview for the job, and I think like Aaron Glenn will have an opportunity to interview for the job. Guys who have been part of that Peyton universe here with the Saints. But I think that might work against him, that he was on Peyton's staff for 3 seasons. And I think there might just be a desire to just like start completely fresh with a completely new set of eyes and a new way of doing things.
I just don't know if I agree with what you're saying, but I just don't know if the Saints front office thinks that way. I just think they really like being comfortable with people they're familiar with, and so I think that actually works to Rizzi's advantage. But
Yeah, I agree.
We'll see
Yeah,
what the thought process is.
you could absolutely be right. I wonder if there is some of that out there.
Right.
And the other factor is money. He would not be that expensive, and that is a factor.
And they're still paying Dennis Allen.
And the offensive coaching staff, which I understand Clint Kubiak got a 3-year deal, so they would owe him 2 more years. The other staff members got 2-year deals, so they'd owe them 1. That's a pretty big chunk of change between those if you brought in an offensive coach that wanted to change out. Right. So you wouldn't have to worry about that. And I think a lot of people like Clint Kubiak in the organization. You don't have to worry about that. So there's a lot of factors that do go in his advantage, but I think Luke makes a great point about are they just ready to move on and turn the page on that whole era and start fresh? That's a big decision that we talked about initially. What's the direction of the organization going forward? Since we haven't heard from the general manager, we don't know.
And we know Aaron Glenn wants to be a head coach, but right now I don't know if this is a job I don't know what else is going to be open, but I mean the Dallas job could be open, and I don't know if the Saints is the first job that Aaron Glenn wants if he has some choice.
That is going to be an issue because if they're going for any sort of a rebuild here, it could be a really tough couple of years if they're going to start trying to get that salary cap right and all that stuff.
And Rizzi knows what.
Right.
That's one thing he does have going for him.
The storyline will obviously be following for the rest of the year. You're watching the Saints Insider podcast on the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. Hit the like button for us while you're down there. We would love it if you do that. We'd also love it if you subscribe to the channel, tell your friends about it, hit the share button, notifications button, all that kind of stuff. We are here through any coaching changes, through anything else, twice a week at least through the rest of the season, and post-game shows, all that kind of stuff. So subscribe to the channel. As we kind of start looking forward to next week and turning the page from the Rizzi debut, first thing is that the Saints did make a fairly notable transaction. And today's transaction segment is proudly sponsored by Associated Grocers. Join our team and help support the success of local independent retail grocers. Apply today for available positions at Associated Grocers. And that is that they released Connor McGovern, the center, and he's actually already been picked up by the Jets again, who is where he came from. He's on the Jets practice squad. And I was looking this up just to see Connor McGovern played 369 snaps in 6 games. Like, he was basically full-time while he was here.
Yeah, look, they picked him up right before the Chiefs game. It was like a day or two before the Chiefs game. And then I think it was Lucas Patrick got hurt in that game. And he ended up playing something like 40 snaps. They benched Nick Salisbury, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And then he's been their starting center ever since. But he's their starting center because their Pro Bowl center has been on IR for the last 6 games. 6 games. He's missed most of the last 7. And he's probably coming back this week.
That's what it looks like. We, again, recording Wednesday before we have an injury report. But, there was a question Erik McCoy possibly could have been coming back for the Falcons game. It was at least, I don't know what percentage chance you want to put on it, 10 or 20% chance going into Saturday. Rizzi said they were going to look at him Saturday and give it a chance. He was listed as doubtful, then downgraded to out. But that's all to say that with another week, we think Erik McCoy is going to be back. And so I guess that raises the question, Rod, because we talk about this Cowboys game and the 91 points in the first 2 games and start. Erik McCoy those are the only 2 games he's been a part of for this team. He got injured on the second snap of the game against Philadelphia in week 3. So it's just a center. You don't think of it as the most important position on the field. And I'm not saying the Saints are going to go back to scoring 40 points a game, but this could be a big deal.
Yeah, he's one of the most valuable players on the offense. He's a captain for a reason. And the season kind of fell apart when he went down against that was the start of the decline as soon as he left the game. So I think he definitely adds to this offense, and he's kind of like the final missing piece because they're not getting you're not getting Olave and Rashid back this season. You assume so. We know that we aren't, but this is the last missing piece, and this is probably as good as the offense is going to get once he returns. So, and he'll help with the communication on the line, and I just think things will be even better. And I think McGovern did a pretty solid job. It wasn't.
Oh, for getting a guy off of somebody else's practice squad. I don't think you could have asked for a lot more from Connor McGovern, but McCoy is clearly a huge upgrade.
Yeah, and I think, look, weirdly enough, their pass protection, which we were all coming into the season like it could be terrible, has been very good when Derek Carr has been in the lineup. I think he's been sacked, I think only like 7 times this season. He wasn't sacked last week against Atlanta. Their tackles have held up really well in pass protection. I think even though McCoy plays a big part in that and communicating and in calling out protections and everything like that, I think the big area where he helps is in the run game. I mean, they were awesome running the football those first 2 weeks. Granted, Panthers' worst run defense in the NFL. Cowboys are right up there with them, or right down there with them, whatever way you want to look at it. But I mean, those guys were moving the tracks that they were all on for the zone running game. Everything looked smooth. Everything looked right. I think he is such a huge part of that. He's a great athlete. He's a really, really good player. I think he's a top 5 center in the NFL. And on top of that, you're talking about his leadership qualities. If you can get him back in there, which we're all expecting, and get this running game back going, I mean, that opens up everything for this offense like we were talking about. And their pass protection has been pretty good. So even if they are missing the two receivers on the outside, I still think they have enough between Alvin, Taysom, Juwan Johnson. Foster Moreau's had a very nice season at tight end. Whatever MVS can give you, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. I still think there's enough for them to be a good offense if their running game is going right.
I think they've got to be able to run the ball.
Yeah, no question.
I mean, we saw what happened in the second half. Once Atlanta moved Terrell on MVS, they made that change at halftime. He was disappeared, and then they had no other options. I mean, they were really struggling offensively, and I think they've got to be able to run with McCoy back. That sets up what they really want to do, which is control the line of scrimmage, run the ball with Alvin, Taysom, and then every once in a while take a shot downfield. That's the whole formula here. And I just think it's going to be limited in the passing game. So getting McCoy back, I think, is huge in that regard. And they ran the ball fairly effectively early on against Atlanta, and then it kind of started. And there'll be a little bit of a challenge this week. I know Cleveland's not ranked highly in their run defense, but they got to be a little stouter than Atlanta. I mean,
they've got some dudes up front.
Yeah, so but I think that's got to be the formula going forward because, I mean, that receiving core is pretty limited. Let's be honest.
What's fair to expect? 91 points over 2 games is one extreme, and then what we saw when Carr was out is the other extreme. This is obviously somewhere in between, but with McCoy back, and this is an aside, but you really got. I mean, Trevor Penning was the highest rated player in the game per PFF grades for the Saints on Sunday, which I think, I'm not saying Trevor Penning's a star or anything, but being able to count on that guy as a solid contributor going forward is a huge win for the Saints.
That's all we talked about in the lead up to the season. Can he stay in the lineup? If he could stay in the lineup and you can trust him to stay in the lineup, that's a win for them.
You got 4/5 of your offensive line kind of settled now going forward for a couple of years, if that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I think they can be a functional, good NFL offense. Which is really that's what you. Obviously, you'd love them to be that super explosive, fun offense from the first 2 weeks, averaging 45.5 points per game. But like, if you could get them averaging 24, somewhere in like the upper. Top 12 in the NFL in scoring over the last couple of weeks, with your guys back and just kind of patching it together in the receiving core and getting that ground game going. And I think that would be a huge success for this team.
And I think it's important also to note, fans get all over Derek Carr all the time, and rightfully so in some respects, but one of the things that they don't seem to notice about him is the subtle things of avoiding negative plays, which he does. I mean, it's no coincidence that I think Rattler and Hayner were sacked like 14 times in 3 games, and he's only been sacked, I think, 6 or 7 in all of his starts because he's avoiding. And sometimes he's just bailing on the play, and it can be frustrating, but it's still not a negative. Yeah. He's not getting sacked. He had no interceptions in that game. And you just look at the Saints. I think they've been sacked 22, 23 times this year as a team. The Browns are coming in. They have 43 sacks offensively with Deshaun Watson and Jameis Winston. So you can see the difference. 43 sacks, that's a lot to overcome. That's, 2nd and 20 or whatever. So there is something to be said about staying out of those long down and distance situations.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like coach speak, but Rizzi he talked a lot about complementary football and the offense playing. I don't think the offense has to be great or the defense has to be great, but if they both just be kind of solid, like Luke said, 20-something points, 2 touchdowns, a couple of field goals, and you just hope the defense holds up, and, you're going to probably win a lot of close games. You're not – those days of that we saw the first 2 weeks of the season probably aren't going to happen, but, they'll win some 24-20 games and 21-17 kind of games. That's what this team's going to have to do.
And if you can do that week in and week out, then when you do face a bad defense, maybe it pops and becomes a 30-point game, and that's the formula for winning in the NFL. So, Saints fans, Associated Grocers is hiring. If you're looking to join a team dedicated to supporting independent grocers, apply today. Your future starts here. Let's take our second break. A couple more things to get to. We want to talk a little Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and then a certain quarterback wearing number 2 who's going to be back in the Superdome this weekend. Right after this. Okay, back on the Saints Insider, just kind of discussing new expectations for the Saints offense now that Erik McCoy is back, but they don't have Rashid Shaheed, and then Chris Olave, we assume he's going to be out a while. We don't know that for sure that it's the full season.
I mean, he'll be out at least the next 3 games, possibly the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you can count on him coming back anyway. So it's a different offense, and given that backdrop, talked about Penning's emergence being a big deal. It was also a big deal to see that the Saints did maybe find something with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, picking him off of the waiver wire when the Bills released him. He caught 3 passes, but is for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he kind of is filling that Shaheed role of being the speedy. You put out the meme, Luke, of freaking run MVS instead of Shaheed. That Carr throws a great deep ball, and now he's got a guy who can go get one. I guess the question now is MVS enough to be your lead receiver?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I just don't think he's, and we were talking about this in our text thread last night, I just don't think that, he's ever going to be, your one. I don't think he's ever had more than, 42 catches in a season. I don't think he's ever had more than, 700 yards in a season. But, he can do what he did the other day. And I think that is an important element to this offense, not just because of what we were talking about with the run game, the play action game, and all that, but it creates space. Teams have to account for that speed, and we saw it sometimes even when they're trying to account for it, it doesn't matter. At first touchdown pass, a 40-yard touchdown pass, he had 3 defenders within 5 yards of him. He outran all of them. So that is something that every now and then that sort of thing will pop. Every now and then he's going to be in signal coverage and you're going to have an opportunity to take a shot to him. That sort of stuff could pop because we do know that Carr throws a very good deep ball. But, is he going to be the guy who's going to go win you 3rd and 7? Is he going to be your go-to there? Probably not. But I do think that that he changes the geometry for the offense in the field. He changes the angles the defense has to play with. And then when you can start taking advantage of the stuff underneath what he's providing vertically, that's where I think his true value comes. He's never going to be a 6 catches for 112 yards and 4 of those move the chains on 3rd down, something like that. It's just not his game. But I do think he can be an effective component of this offense.
We should note he did on 3rd and goal find a way to get open in the end zone and catch a touchdown pass. So
that was a weird casual looking pass, by the way.
It was.
It was
And it looked for all the world like the Saints were going to stall out there. They didn't have Taysom in the game for some reason. They'd gone backward on their first 2 plays. I mean, that was a big play. So he can do it, but obviously hear what you're saying. You spread the field out with this guy, and then, we're talking about the tight ends and Alvin Kamara and Taysom, and it opens up more opportunities underneath for the other playmakers you do have left.
Yeah, well, Cedric Wilson will probably be back.
Cedric Wilson should be back, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's big. I mean, just for this team, have a veteran guy that Carr seems to also trust these guys that have played, likes these veteran receivers, and he's definitely been in the wars. But I think Luke's right. I mean, counting on him to get 60, 40-yard bombs. First of all, Atlanta's defense is one of the, I mean, they're pretty bad. You know, what was that shootout they had with the Bucks a couple weeks ago?
They get no pass rush.
No pass rush at all. So that Deuce was pointing this out this week. The extra time Carr had to climb the pocket, that extra second he had, allowed MVS to break free. And early in the season, when they had so many injuries up front, they didn't have time for that to develop. So that was a big thing. And I think the offensive line coming back and the running game's effectiveness is going to make those shot plays. I think that can still be a staple with him, but it's the rest of the attack that I worry about in the passing game.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they're going to take those shot plays with him for sure, or they're gonna dial him up and hope they're there. But like I just like I don't think he's going to be like getting 8, 9, 10 targets a game.
If you pick him up for your fantasy team, you better be prepared for the 1.4 point game. Like he's going to pop some weeks, and other weeks he's going to be non-existent.
Yeah,
100%. I mean, I think about, I hate to bring this name up, but like Trayquan Smith, every once in a while he'd have like a monster game. He'd have like a 180-yard receiving game or 100, because he could make those big plays down the field, and then he'd disappear for weeks. I think it could be something like that.
Ted Ginn.
Oh, I like that one. That's a good one.
Yeah. And I mean, it's an important part of your offense, Rod. Like we talk about the running game and the play action. That's why you set that up, because he just catches one of those things a game. It changes the whole game.
Yeah, and we keep talking about the running game, but that's what this team just needs. It's a lot like what Rashid was for this team. And so, yeah, he'll just get you a couple of those plays a game, and this will probably, help you get us to that 24 points a game, and that might be enough. So
I think both of his deep shots came off play action, if I'm not mistaken.
Definitely the first one did. I'm trying to think.
Carr was 5 of 7 on play action for like 150 something yards, and had a 153.3 passer rating on those plays. Like that'll play, but that's why like he is especially valuable on those types of plays. That's the role Shaheed was playing. I just think he gives you less than Shaheed on a down and down basis.
Yeah, agreed. All right, on the other side, and we're going to wrap up with this, one of the big storylines this week, and I guess you could kind of see it coming, Rod, like when we look at the schedule and Jameis signs with Cleveland. Obviously, Deshaun Watson was the starter to start the year, but it just almost felt like it was destiny. Something was going to get Jameis into this game at the Dome coming back, and I think it's going to be emotional for him for sure. I mean, you saw my slide title here. It's a tribute to Eminem, the white boy from Detroit that Jameis likes to quote. But it's going to be emotional for him. It's going to be emotional, I think, for some portions of the fan base that always thought he didn't get enough of a chance here. It's just one of those really interesting storylines the NFL provides sometimes.
Yeah, we haven't heard from Jameis yet this week. I'm sure he'll talk today, like quarterbacks do, and it'd be interesting to see what he says. Maybe
Unwavering faith.
Yeah, I doubt if he says it, it's going to be a lot of that. He's going to try to make this like it's just any other game, but it's not. I remember talking to him last year when he thought he was going to get the start against Tampa Bay, and they ended up going back to – was that last year or 2 years ago?
No, it was last year.
It was last year.
Carr,
they started Carr.
Right.
Yeah.
But, I remember talking to him about that, and he kind of talked about it being destiny, and it was kind of how things were supposed to play out, and he ended up not getting the start, but he was really looking forward to that game. So I know this game – means a lot to him, and even if he won't say it, it's
guaranteed.
It's guaranteed.
Guaranteed.
He'll be super juiced up, and else his pregame speech will probably be another one. It'll go viral, whatever he says. So.
It's going to be amazing, and he is going to have a big say in the outcome of this game, even more so than our starting quarterback. I mean, you could see him throw for 4 touchdown passes or 3 picks or both. Like anything seems likely.
That's what he's done in his 2 starts, right?
I think so.
3 touchdown passes, and like one of them was a game winner with like 59 seconds left against
immediately following
the Ravens,
a dropped pick.
Yeah.
Against the Ravens, immediately following a drop pick, and then the next week he goes out and throws 3 interceptions. That's just who he is. It's who he has been throughout his career. A lot of people defended Jameis, and Jameis had a very nice start when he was the starting quarterback in 2021. 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He looked like he'd kind of turned the page. Sean Payton was getting the most out of him. But, this is who he has been. Even in that season, he was a little loose with the football sometimes. There were some kind of lucky plays. There was Hail Mary touchdown in there. There was like a couple like where he's just like on the verge of getting sacked and he just kind of throws it up and like Jawan Johnson one hands it in the end zone or something like that.
Man.
Yeah. That
A.T.
play.
Perry playing Minnesota last year too.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just it's in his DNA as a football player. He's going to take risks. He's going to trust his talent, of which he has plenty of it. And sometimes it's gonna work in his favor, and sometimes it's not. And he's probably the most volatile quarterback in the NFL. So we'll see which one plays out on Sunday against the Saints. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if either. I think the Saints do a nice job of capitalizing on opportunities, but maybe he won't give them to him this week. I don't know. I have no idea how this week's gonna play out.
And they're coming off of a bye, so he's had basically 13 days to kind of mentally prepare for this game. So I don't know if that helps. Or
He's
hurts,
had
but
10 years to mentally prepare for being an NFL quarterback. He hasn't changed much. So
Can I make another Clancy's bet?
how many do you owe us? 2?
Tyrann Mathieu is going to get at least one pick off Jameis Winston this week. Guaranteed. Or I'll buy you all dinner at Clancy's. It's like a lock. It's like the convergence of the greatest instinctive interceptor in the league with the guy that's going to just continue to throw it
one
in
of
there.
the other Clancy's bets, by the way.
So like
The
if you
Cowboys
lose,
from the Super Bowl last year is definitely
we're still
one.
waiting
if you
on that.
lose this bet, are you going to buy us 2 dinners at Clancy's?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
At some point, we got to schedule one of these things.
Norm's
Oh,
in
God.
too. Norm's
Yeah,
in the group.
I
No big
hope
table.
the audio picked up Norm laughing at your.
I'm telling you, it's a lock.
Our company Christmas party is like December. It's the day before the Commanders game, I think. Maybe lunch that day. We should cash in one of those Clancy's
That could be a
bets.
long day. I'm not sure that'd be good for the Christmas party. Maybe show up after Clancy's lunch.
after an afternoon with Garth.
Hey,
It's not going to be martinis.
let's just call it our activation period, okay?
Yeah. But it's going to be fun. There's no question having Jameis makes this a lot more fun game to watch.
To Rod's point, I am really curious to see what he's going to be like in his press conferences. I have to imagine it is going to be the most boring possible press conference. Jameis had a way of doing that when he was the starter.
Right.
If it was like something that he wasn't like, it was like a juicy storyline.
Yeah, he was not going.
He would not engage.
Cliche machine.
Yeah. It would like fun. Jameis only came out when he was like on the bench. Even post games after big wins, he was very, very measured.
It feels like he's preparing for life after football as like a preacher or something, a leader of men is what it feels like when he speaks now. It's just, I've never seen, this is an interesting transformation because he wasn't like that early in his career at Tampa, if you go back and see some of the videos of him. But he's definitely evolved, I think, off the field greatly.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. The Saints DBs better get in front of the jugs machine this week because they're gonna have opportunities to pick some balls off. They just got to take advantage. So that will be definitely one part we talk about Friday when we preview Saints versus Browns. That's Saints' next game right before the bye week, so kind of a natural separation point in their season. We'll see if they can keep things rolling and maybe keep the door cracked open on making December meaningful. So
Keep on keeping on.
that's right. Darren Rizzi Game 2, Jameis Winston's return, and much more. That's coming up on the Friday podcast. Our thanks to our sponsor, Bank Plus. Norman Bell is our producer today. And for Rod Walker, Luke Johnson, and Jeff Duncan, I'm Zach Ewing. Thank you for watching The Saints Insider.
Leave me alone, Jeff.